Welcome to the Planning and Development Council meeting of the town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets?
We have no regrets this evening.
Thank you. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. Would two of us like to move and second resolving into committee of the whole? Councillor Dudek, Councillor Lischina, thank you very much. If there's no objection, I'll call that carried. And we're now resolved into the committee of the whole, which is our custom for meetings dealing with planning and development. Council, we have two public consent items. I'd like a motion for the consent items. Councillor Giddings?
I have a couple of questions on the first, if we could separate that out.
Yes. Are you moving them and then separating to question?
No, separating them.
Okay. I need a motion for the consent items. Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Giddings, you're up. And then Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Haslethiel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank staff for the report. I do have a couple of questions based on some of the comments in the report. One of them being, it talks about the tools that the town can continue to employ. Just the first question is, what kind of tools would those be to respond to the changes that have been put through?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the tools that we continue to use are quite simply the urban structure and the official plan as we work through the number of issues that the municipality is facing these days. I think what council has seen and what staff have also experienced is the constant change from the province in terms of the onslaught, I'll say, of legislation and just the constant change and uncertainty that it brings. And quite frankly, what we've been trying to do is play catch up in a lot of that. So whether that's using the tools that we have left in terms of DCs, CBCs, but primarily as it relates to planning, it really is our official plan.
Thank you. Another one of the bullets, any changes to the urban structure in an attempt to respond to legislation changes will negatively affect Oakville. Could you expand upon that a little?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we see with the urban structure is it really provides the certainty that council needs as we continue to move forward and we try and face the legislation that has been coming at us. What we want to ensure is that with the uncertainty that the legislation has brought, there is at least some solace in the fact that we continue to have an urban structure which provides that level of certainty in terms of where growth is going to go. So by being able to point to those that ask, whether it's the public, whether it's the province, whomever, where we can simply say this is where we are accommodating that growth going forward.
All right, and for those that may be watching that haven't had the benefit of all the reports from staff, downloading more responsibility to local municipalities, is there a top 5 list or a top 10 list that you could share?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the changes have been rather extensive. In terms of those that have been delegated down to the municipalities, the regional planning is no longer or will no longer be available to us as that upper tier municipality once proclaimed. There are the matters dealing with natural heritage where the conservation authorities will only be dealing with those matters that they're now mandated to take control over. There are other elements in terms of how we deal with inclusionary zoning. That has been scaled back. There have been pieces with development charges, which has also been scaled back. The CBC has been scaled back. Excuse me. There's been a cap on parkland as well. And this goes back a number of bills as well, a number of pieces of statute. So when I say it's been compounding, these are some of the things that we've been seeing over the last little while that has created those greater implications to the town.
And the report sums it up well. The province now has oversight over Oakville's land use planning matters, but it is unknown how the province will exercise those powers. So, well said. The OPR continues, staff continues to respond to new provincial policy. Studies which may have been completed will need minor updates. Are there a number of those studies that will be coming forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as we get close, hopefully within the next few years of wrapping up the official plan review, we'll have to go back and take a look at all of the OPAs that have recently been approved by this council to ensure that we're still conforming with provincial policy. So we do that towards the end of the program just to make sure we tie off all of the loose ends or any other issues that have been created.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to separate 4.2, so nothing on this direct one, but just wanted to make sure that was separated out as well. Thank you.
All righty, Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Thank you for the report. I guess I have a question about, there's some language around, use the word thwarting, and it's an interesting choice of words because one of my concerns is what would define thwarting growth based on how you've put it in this report? So as an example, we may get an application where the land mass and the application itself is just not, in the view of council, appropriate or right. Is that thwarting growth?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the intent or the messaging in the report is really to say that the decisions that council makes and the decisions it'll have to make on future development applications, this isn't intended to fetter that decision making. What we've seen is that where municipalities have been working at cross purposes to what the province has explicitly stated it wanted to have happen, where councils have responded to what their community is looking for, the province has stepped in on those municipalities. This council has made the decisions to employ an urban structure. It has in place an official plan, and our intent is to uphold that official plan, that urban structure, and continue to provide recommendations to this council based on the policies that are there. That remains our intent. And how council responds to those development applications, again, that's up to council. What we've seen is the province, when other communities have tried to make those decisions, the province has decided to step in on those communities. It was an observation just to say, these are the things that have been happening, and that's the tone that the province has taken over the last few years as it's been deploying its plan, we'll say, of delivering more housing.
So further to that, then, if an application is in the urban growth node and council determines that that is not an appropriate application based on an OPA that's in place, et cetera, I come back to, are you advising us that that is thwarting growth, or are you saying we still have the responsibility to make the right decision for our town, even though we have a province that's decided to put a whole bunch of changes through and perhaps is taking over land use planning in its entirety?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this council needs to make the decisions it needs to make based on the policies that are in effect. We can't be fearful of what the province may or may not do. That's not the intent of what good planning is. Good planning is based on what we bring forward to this council, based on the merits of an application, based on the in effect policy that is there, and we provide those recommendations to council. Council makes those decisions based on that community context. That is the extent of it, full stop. What the province chooses to do, we can't presuppose what they may do in those circumstances. That'll be up to them.
So I guess where what I'm trying to understand as well, and I appreciate the dialogue, is that a developer is going to take us to the OLT. And we have a document now that some of the language in here could be interpreted in a way that is, you were told this is this is the only place you can, you're supposed to grow. Should we be worried that this document's in the public realm and now could be potentially with a developer who says, but you said that that's where you will grow, and my application is in the urban growth node?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I actually think that question about what would be the position that a developer would take was probably better directed at legal in terms of that. But I did want to just comment that in terms of thwarting, it's in the eye of the beholder, really. And this council is completely at its responsibility to make decisions and wise planning decisions on the applications in front of you. That is absolutely your purview. You've consistently done it for a very long time and will in the future, I have no doubt. But what I did want to say is that it is in the eye of the beholder. I can't seem to say that properly, but it is that. And I think you need to look at the actions that the province has taken on other municipalities in terms of how they've commented and how they've taken action on development applications. As of Friday or Monday, the province put a minister's zoning order down on Mississauga in terms of doubling the amount of population in one of their Lakeview communities and 2 other sites. So I think that that's what council just needs to be aware of. It's what the actions that the province is taking. And what the report is really saying is you have an urban structure, you've approved it in your plan, all that's out in the public right now. So whatever is there in the public is what any one town and the developer would use in the defense of whatever case they're making. But all of that is there. And the urban structure is really your best means to protect your natural heritage areas, your maintaining your stable residential, or the character of your stable residential neighborhoods, and directing growth to a specific area.
So thank you for that. And I did ask legal, so if you would like me to ask them in the open forum, I can do that. But I did ask if whether or not this could be used at an OLT, and I was advised that yes, it could be. So,
And yes, it could be, because it is very much part of the official plan itself. So the official plan talks about the urban structure and the way it directs growth.
thank you. My other question is, I think we all are in agreement that the urban structure is what we've always supported, and it's an important part of how we grow. We've also spoken up and said that, when there was a rope of 49, that sprawl was not something we were supportive of. So I guess I have some concerns about the tone of what this says, but where I do concur is that it talks about so long as there is a plan in place. So I'd like to understand, we've been told that that we can achieve the pledge target. We know that our 2051 population target, what it is, and we have some confidence that we can get there. Could we get the build-out populations projected for all the growth nodes? So we understand the plan and can see and publicly verify to the province, we are in good stead, we are doing our part to move this along.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, great point, Councillor, and that is something that we are working on currently with Halton Regions. We're working through the best planning estimates, and we're working at them now from a bottom-up approach, where we're saying to the province, these are the applications that we're seeing, here's the yield that we're seeing, here's the areas where we're expecting to grow in line with the urban structure. Very similar to the discussions that we had in front of this council when we were talking about the IGMS and ROPA 49 a little while ago. And as we get through that, which I want to say is by the end of next month, we'll be able to report back to council to provide a little bit more clarity in terms of where the population is going in the context of the urban structure.
Okay. I'll leave it there right now. Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton, to staff. I've marveled at our planning department's ability to write professional reports for over 20 years. This report seems different. An example on page 10, the legislation changes will negatively affect Oakville. I'm surprised at the word will. That's not normal for their language. Then council must remain strategic. And then I go to another page. It is foolhardy to assume the changes will be rescinded. I'm just thinking we can do a better job with the wordsmithing here. And I would actually ask that we send this back to change the wordsmithing so you're not using words like a disservice, foolhardy, and will and must. That's not normal that I recall seeing in the last 20 years from staff. And I wonder if we could refer this back to staff and bring it back at the next meeting, whether it be the Wednesday meeting, I'm thinking even this week. I can't support the wording as it stands now. The rest of the report is fine. It's just when they get into it looks like personal comments, and that's not normal for the staff, I don't think. That's my opinion. And I'd ask for a recorded vote on the referral.
Madam CEO.
Mayor, members of council, speaking to the tone of the report, perhaps it is a different tone than we've used in the past, but I would suggest that we're in a little bit of an unprecedented times. I looked back at my calendar the other day, and it was February of 22 that the province came out with the Affordable Housing Task Force. And since then, we've had one change after another. And in essence, in my planning career, the legislation has been completely rewritten in just over a year. So it is unprecedented times. And I think probably the tone of the report reflects a little of that frustration of not being able to, as your director of planning has said, take a breath. Because it has continually changed over and over, and it really is rewriting the planning legislation for the province and going back to an era before the growth plan was in place, where a different type of growth management strategy was in place. This council, I think, certainly in the town, as well as at the region, has prided itself in terms of its growth management in trying to contain development within the existing urban boundaries to the extent possible, protecting farmland and those other attributes. And I think this legislation, and I am speaking as an opinion here, completely changes that direction. So I appreciate your comments in terms of the tone of the report, but it is a report that we felt that was important to put in front of council because of the significance of the change that's happening at the provincial level.
All right, thank you for that, Madam CEO. The motion to refer is in order. The only thing that's debatable is whether or not to refer. Are there any speakers for or against, or shall I put the vote on referral? Councillor Elder?
Sorry, I'll put my hand down. No, that's cool.
Thank you. Councillor Haslett-Deal?
I'm going to support Councillor Elger's referral back. I understand the level of frustration. We all experience the frustration every day. I even understand that that the intent of this is to perhaps give us clear advice around what and where we could go to avoid some landmines possibly. But I do think it is a document that needs to convey that in a different way. The tone of saying to act otherwise is in disservice to the community. I don't think anyone in this council would ever act in a disservice to the community in our decision making. I think we all recognize growth is inevitable, and I think we try to administer the guidance as best we possibly can. So I would appreciate it being referred back just for some adjustments for the tone that I think would make the most sense. Thank you.
Councillor Adams and then Councillor O'Meara.
I'm not going to support the referral. This is staff's report, and the motion that's on the floor is just to receive it. I understand the distaste that many have about the situation that we find ourselves in with respect to the provincial changes that have happened, I don't like a whole lot of them myself. But referring it, I don't think solves that issue. I think if there's concerns about what the province has done and how it's impacting us, then we should be asking for an option report on those issues. But this is a report with staff's opinion and their advice to us. So I don't see any purpose in referring it back.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm oddly, not oddly, but I did read in the same fashion how Councillor Elgar read this. And just for instance, again, at the bottom of page 12, the town's urban structure is used defensively and offensively. And it offers a measure of predictability. Again, this is commentary. I mean, staff should be providing facts and data, and council makes those decisions on offense or defense or whatever that means. Again, I'm still not really clear on what that means, and I'm not sure how those words got into this report as well. And I'd actually be with Councillor Elgar on this. I would not want to endorse something that's meandering into the political spectrum that staff have created here and are asking us to endorse on this. I mean, you provide the facts, council makes the decisions based on what we think is politically the best thing and not politically the best thing for our council. I'm not sure where there is a change, and I'm with you, Councillor Elgar, on that. I've read this, and even 4.2, which we'll get into. I'm not sure where that has come from, but in my 10 years, I haven't seen this kind of stuff here, so I'll be supporting the referral to just make sure what we approve and what we receive is the level of neutral, professional advice that we get from staff and not sort of laced with a little bit of nuance one way or another. Thank you.
Councillor, I just point out for your consideration that you're not endorsing it. You're receiving staff advice. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll support the referral motion from Councillor Elgar. Looking at some of the items in terms of the urban structure, directing growth to strategic growth areas, which we understand, and our official plan shows that, does not mean that there will be some measure of modest growth in established neighborhoods. As of right, residents can pull their permits now. So I don't know what modest growth is. I have nothing to judge that by. I haven't seen anything come forward yet. So just one of the many examples that I add to my councillor colleagues' comments.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor McNeice?
Through your worship, I'll support the referral as well. Some of just sort of high-level concerns. I see a commentary on top of page 14 about the negative impacts of urban sprawl. I would sort of like to see that balanced with the consequences of over-intensification. I think it's always sort of a balance. If you know, we're building too many skyscrapers in one place, we have other consequences we have to face, and there's many different ways we can densify. I think we all agree that we need to densify and add more housing, but there's more than one way to do it. So I would appreciate sort of a little more well-rounded, you know, consequences of urban sprawl, consequences of over-intensification, and many different ways we can densify. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McNeice. Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I understand it, and I get the terminology we're not endorsing, but if you receive something, you're accepting it, are you not?
If you receive something, you've received it. It acknowledges that they gave you the advice. That's all it means. And
But then we're
if you
accepting
try to
that.
layer on these other connotations, you're departing from what the English language actually serves us for. But you're entirely, you know, council's entirely free to refer the advice back to staff.
Okay.
I will, when everyone else has had a say, I'll give my advice on the subject. But, you know, if you don't like the advice, you can send it back.
I
Councillor Knoll?
will be supporting the referral. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knoll.
Much of what I was going to say, Councillor Adams touched on already, but I'm just going to say that I think it's a slippery slope when we start censoring the advice of our staff. We pay these folks a reasonable salary to be professional. They're highly accredited, we're not. Well, maybe with the exception of one person on council that has some planning background, but we pay them to give us their advice. We don't have to love it. Frankly, I don't disagree with almost anything they said here. So I'm not going to be supporting the referral. I want our staff to be able to speak openly to us in public session to help frame our decisions going forward. And when we start sending back documents and ordering them to change them to suit our needs, I think that we're acting in their stead, and I don't think that's appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Worship. I disagree with Councillor Noel's comment with respect to censoring. I don't think this is what we're talking about. We're just talking about some wordsmithing here to make it more appropriate with their professional writing. I think it's on a personal level, some of these comments are made and some of the descriptives that we're using. So all we're simplifying, let's correct it and let's take it back and fix it and then move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Grant for the first time. Councillor Duddick, I'll come back to you.
There we go. We seem to be caught in this cycle of trying to wordsmith over and over again. If we're just sending this back in order to change one or two words, it seems ridiculous. The facts are the facts. We're being asked to receive an opinion, and I agree for the most part with everything that's been stated here. So I can't support the deferral just for the fact that we want to change one or two words in the document. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, Worship. I think there may be a difference of opinion, obviously there is, as to what the facts are versus commentary and portraying council's possible decisions in a less than favorable light, using things like disservice, thwarting, foolhardy. I've never seen anything like that in any kind of planning report. I've seen things where they say it's planning's recommendation that, in our professional opinion, that, but we're being portrayed before we've even had a decision. And that's where I take exception to this, is the fact that it's almost personal. It's not professional.
Councillor, I'm not sure why you identify with the words you're complaining about. No, anyway, but thank you for your opinion. For second timers, Councillor Noel, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to be clear on something I said. I mean, censorship is censorship. Censorship is disagreeing with something somebody says and wanting to correct the facts that were presented. These are facts in the eyes of the staff. They are giving professional advice. Councillor Chisholm, with great respect, said we were sending it back to be corrected. How do you correct advice? This is advice, this is opinion. This is like disagreeing with an article in the Toronto Star and sending it back saying, no, I want you to rewrite this because this op-ed is wrong. You didn't portray things correctly. So I feel strongly that this is exactly what it is. It does not prejudice our decision-making in the future. We can still make decisions as we see fit, notwithstanding advice. We, on a regular basis, sometimes take advice of the staff, sometimes we don't. We sometimes say we agree with your recommendation on this proposal, and sometimes we don't. And it doesn't mean that, that they're wrong. It just means that we don't agree with the facts they presented. There's nothing different here, in my opinion. And I don't think it's appropriate to be telling professionals what to say and how to say it. And the last thing I want to say on this is that I fully accept the CIO's explanation of this thing. Councillor Duddick is right. We've not seen wording like this before, but we've never seen such dramatic and unprecedented change as this before. And I can only imagine what the planning staff are going through. I know my head's swimming. Every day you read another article about the implications and the changes. These folks have to deal with this every single day. So you know what? I have no problem personally with a bit of that invective showing through in their advice. So anyway, I've said my piece. Look forward to the vote. Okay, Council, we've got a long agenda ahead, and at this rate, we're not getting through any of it. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Hazard-Deal, Councillor Elgar, Councillor O'Meara disappeared. Councillor Hazard-Deal.
Sorry, just preemptively getting rid of my hand lest I forget it stays up and it stays there for a while. Your worship, your comments that we have a long agenda ahead of us makes me actually question why these are consent items in the first place, but we'll get to that in 4.2. The question of advice versus commentary, I think, is not being delineated here. I will always take advice from our professional planning staff. When our staff put in quotes in our own sentence to the town, and you can't wish it away, I mean, this is not advice. This is commentary. I will always go for advice. This report is laden with commentary. And I don't understand why we're going to accept that. We shouldn't be accepting that. We should look for advice and not commentary. And I don't want to confuse the two, because there's a lot of commentary in here, which again is something that I haven't seen. And I just want to delineate the fact between what advice is, that everybody's saying we accept advice, and what is commentary, and in adjectives flavoring that advice. And I think there's an important delineation there to be made. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, Council, we're repeating ourselves at this point. I'd like to put the vote. Councillor Haslet-Thiel, Councillor Elgar, do you have anything new to say? Councillor Haslet-Thiel?
I think my only comment would be, there are paragraphs in here that bring forth the message that staff want to tell us around the importance of the urban structure. And then there are as others have said, paragraphs that waver off that into commentary that it is not about the facts or the advice. And so, I mean, there's language in here that almost all of us could go, yes, and we've already approved that, and yes, we've already directed that, and yes, we've already agreed with that. And so, to some degree, I think it's also asking, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for repeating that. I appreciate your efforts to make it clear. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton, to staff. I was hoping a referral back could be cleaned up in an hour or two and come back at our Wednesday meeting. That's what I was hoping, or we could call a special meeting of council. I want to get this through, but I want to get it through that we're using professional advice, not comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. All right, I'm going to call the vote. I am not going to support referral. This is advice and opinion from our staff. Referring it back sets an unusual and unprecedented statement where we're telling staff we don't like the opinion you gave us. We don't like the advice you're giving us. There is no, in my mind, look, I was an English professor once. There's the distinction that's being made here between advice and commentary. The commentary is advice. So for that reason, I cannot support sending a document back to staff and telling them to give me, to give us advice, to give different advice, basically. It's our job to receive their advice, and then we make our decisions based on what we think is best for the town, and I think that's clear. Asking for different advice is a slippery slope. So Councillor Elgar's motion, just to clarify everything, is to refer this to the next meeting of P&D on Wednesday. And, beg your pardon? To council on Wednesday. And I mean, it's as valid to refer it there as anywhere else. And he's called for a recorded vote. And so the clerk will call the roll, and I think we're all here in person, so we can do it in the old-fashioned way.
Can I say something?
Yes. All right, his motion, I'm sure he'll agree, is to refer it to a meeting that I will call in accordance with the procedure bylaw. Wednesday doesn't give the 48 hours notice. Thank you, Madam Clerk. That's a useful detail. All right, those in favor of referral would please rise to be named by the clerk.
Councillor O'Meara, Councillor McNeese, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Haslet-Thiel, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Elgar, Counselor Nanda, and Counselor Shi.
All right, the referral carries, and the others will be recorded in opposition to the referral. Can I turn everybody's attention to item 4.2? Councilor O'Meara, you separated it, so you're first.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, as our CAO just mentioned a few moments ago, this is the most unprecedented time since 2022 that we as a council through planning have gone through. So again, I'm really curious as to why this would be a consent item with something that there are staff comments going back to the province on this, on fundamental changes to everything here that upend the entire way that we have been planning in this province. So I would hope staff take away from that this is important to all of council, and this bears not just a discussion, it also bears a presentation. When and stuff has happened, follow the bouncing ball. What's changed? What are the deadlines now? What are we facing now? This isn't just for the 15 of us who live and breathe this every day. It's for everybody who's watching this and needs to understand where the bouncing ball is going. This is not a consent item to me personally, so I would just want to emphasize that with staff right now.
Councilor O'Meara?
Yes, sir.
I have good news for you. Staff have a presentation if you want it.
That would be great. That would be great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Shall I call the presentation?
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Berger?
Good evening. Good evening, through you, Mr. Chair, and to the council. It's great to see everybody. I believe the move to consent for this item was really to, not to hide anything, and council always has the opportunity to bring that forward for discussion, so that's what we're doing here, which is great. There are other items on the agenda, and sometimes consent helps to move matters along. But as we have done in the past, we're prepared with a presentation, and this council has always been forward in terms of bringing this information to the public and for discussion. So this is item 4.2. It's an information, one in a series of information and updates on provincial initiatives. It covers Bill 109, Bill 23, which we've been busy implementing here at the town and with our agency partners. Bill 97, which landed April 6th, I believe, before the long weekend. And we'll get to the presentation. There's about a dozen or so slides, and then I'll try and get out of your way for discussion and questions. So a little bit of background here for everyone to Councilor O'Meara's comments following the bouncing ball, which we're all trying to do as it bounces. October 25th, 2022, the More Homes Built Faster Housing Supply Action Plan was initiated by the province, and that set the goal to build 1.5 million new homes over the next 10 years. Then followed by Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act, and Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, as key components of the province's action plan. We'll get into some of those details in a little bit. And there is a long series of reports as well to support those, the commentary around those bills. And the latest proposal, Bill 97, Helping Homeowners, Protecting Tenants Act, and proposed provincial planning statement. This would replace the current growth plan and the current provincial policy statement. Further amendments are proposed to the Planning Act, the Development Charges Act, the Municipal Act, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing Act, and so on. In terms of our updates on the implementation of Bill 109, Council has adopted official plan amendments 47 and 48, which are now in force. 47 and 328, which are in force. Those really dealt with our pre-consultation process and the requirements for a complete application for site plan. So that took our current practice and made it more of a policy and a procedure. OPAs 53 and 329, again, adopted by council, are under appeal. And those official plan amendments were addressing the timely processing of development applications and the need for early public engagement. And this council has been participating in that enhanced process with our developer-initiated public information meetings. And that's really as a way of front-ending some of our process and our review in order to deal with the timelines imposed by the recent changes in legislation. Bill 23 was dealing with, at the staff level, we've been amending our development engineering site plan process because some of our powers are removed there in the Planning Act. We've been responding on cultural heritage matters related to our listed properties, also known as the municipal register. We plan to be reporting back on potential revenue losses from changes to development charges, and we've been busy working with the province to address new requirements for municipal reporting on planning matters. There will be a series of other reports coming forward in time as these changes work their way through and as we are able to respond and report back. So, proposed Bill 97 and the provincial planning statement. On April 26, 2023, as mentioned, the province introduced Bill 97 and a proposed provincial planning statement to replace the current provincial policy statement and growth plan. And for over 20 years, the PPS has guided policy planning in the province, and the growth plan is 2006, the first plan. So coming up on 20 years of growth planning, changing with this proposed Bill 97. As mentioned, 7 provincial statutes, including the Planning Act, are proposed to be amended to clarify existing provisions, further remove barriers to increase housing supply, and to make life easier for home buyers and renters. The proposed provincial planning statement, also the new PPS, maybe some confusion there, signals a significant change in Ontario's planning framework, putting housing as a top priority amongst all the other important planning matters in the province. In terms of staff comments, and there's an overview and a response throughout the whole report back and forth. Essentially, the view of staff is that the scope of these changes is broad and the potential implications to the town are extensive. And that's been a consistent message coming from our analysis of these changes. We're generally aligned, as is council, with the intent of the legislation to support removing barriers to housing, to increase housing supply. And we are proposing through this work to submit comments to the province in response to the Environmental Registry of Ontario postings, also known as EROs. More detail on that in the report and a little bit more highlighted through this presentation. Again, as we're all aware, and it's been made, this comment's been made many times, this evening even, it's a dynamic and evolving situation with these proposed changes. Some are not in force and effect yet, so we're anticipating these changes coming along further later. So some of the Bill 97 comments highlighted from the report. There's a narrowed definition of area of employment. This is in the Planning Act. That removes institutional, commercial, and office. It actually prohibits them from being in areas of employment. And there's a concern that this may impact the ability of the town to provide for long-term employment land supply. And it may possibly impact our economic development strategy to attract key sectors to Oakville. Office, for example. One comment here, amending our official plan to conform to the new framework when that new framework comes into effect will be a key strategy for the town to take, a key step to take in order to continue to employ to protect our employment lands as much as possible within the new framework. There was a minor extension to the planning application fee return schedule to July 1st, 2023. So that's a Bill 109 refinement, I say, in the Planning Act, and in the Development Charges Act, I believe. And that has given us 6 months more to implement refined process in order to address development applications in a more rapid fashion. Then another broad comment that the minister continues to centralize power within the minister's office, and that potentially could jeopardize local planning, reduce transparency, and run counter to some of our town objectives. Further highlighting Bill 97, the proposed changes would reintroduce site plan controls for residential development of 10 or less units on a single lot for parcels of land within a certain distance of the waterfront, and within 300 meters of a railway. And those impacts and implications will be further addressed through staff analysis and in collaboration with our colleagues in other municipalities in the region. And those implications and those, if any, those changes will be brought forward again to council at a future time. There's a section in the changes to the Municipal Act regarding rental protection, essentially. And there's a concern that the minister is stepping in and perhaps taking away some of the opportunities for council to make decisions around rental protection and rental protection bylaws. And so that's just a general concern, and that there's some bylaws already in effect in other municipalities, and that those appear to be good models, and that the province should propose changes to the Municipal Act that enable those types of bylaws to come forward. And it's really regarding permits and demolition and conditions for converting properties away from rental. There's broad categories or themes within the report that highlight some of the changes in the provincial planning statement. Housing and planning for people is one of the themes that we draw out in the report. Everyone here would be familiar with the minimum growth forecast contained within the current growth plan. Those are not carried forward in the proposed planning statement, but in terms of transition and implementation, the province has stated that those minimum growth forecasts to 2051 will remain as minimum growth forecasts until such time that the local municipalities undertake their own forecasting. Staff are supportive of undertaking local growth forecasting. We've done a lot of that in the past. We have great talent in-house to do that, and we have consultants that help us from time to time as well. So that's an area where we would be very comfortable with assuming that responsibility. But you still need coordination at a broader scale, and that emerges again as a comment or a concern within the report. It's also a general comment that the proposed changes in the legislation appear to want to make intensification everywhere easier. And this is back to the discussion around the urban structure. We have a path, we have a direction that has been around before this government, in provincial government, and it will be around after this provincial government. It's a strong urban structure, and it will serve Oakville well in the long term to follow that direction, which is what we do. Further commentary on growth management and intensification. As mentioned, significant fundamental change in Ontario and a return to a pre-growth plan era. Urban growth centers, Midtown Oakville and Oakville, are now really taken out of the policy context, and there are growth target changes and some policy changes around encouragement as opposed to required. So again, back to our urban structure, that's where we want growth to go. We still have the same forecast, minimum forecast to accommodate. That's what our structure will provide for. There are changes in the densities and some of the policies around major transit station areas, so that's also Midtown Oakville and Bronte-Go MTSA. This is an ongoing comment in all our work about downloading responsibility and uncertainty around who will do what in the future. Some of that is clear. Some of that we're taking steps at the corporate level to anticipate those changes and staff up accordingly, but there's still uncertainty around what our ultimate role will be when some of these changes come into effect. The big question is, what role will the town play in assuming responsibility for regional planning roles? This is now to the provincial planning statement around employment and land use. There's a new definition for area of employment, and again, if that allows certain residential uses to encroach on important employment uses, that could unsettle or destabilize some of our employment base. So that's a concern that we've identified. And there's also an ability now for privately initiated applications to convert employment lands. So we're calling that an ad hoc type of conversion, whereas before, council will be familiar with the term municipal comprehensive review, where where conversions were evaluated across the town and across the region and in the overall context deemed to be strategic or not, and proceed or not in terms of affecting the land budget. Some of that is being taken away, some of that authority is being taken away from the planning authorities. And then this is going back more than a couple of years now, the provincially significant employment zones, the PZs, which was a mapping designation, but no policies from the province. Those are proposed not to be carried forward in this latest round of proposed changes. And we've asked about if that was going to be a way for municipalities to protect employment lands, and if that is going away, what alternative ways would we be provided in order to continue to protect our employment zones? Just briefly touching on climate change and the environment. Generally, just read a red line version of the old provincial policy statement. A lot of the direct language around climate change and adaptation and responding to impacts has been stricken and replaced with more general policies to encourage climate change adaptation. So again, viewed as perhaps a weakening or a watering down of some of those environmental protections or importance of planning for the environment. Again, it's important to provide housing and new supply, but also in balance with the natural environment and the broader climate impacts. Again, another area where we perhaps relied on our partners, our agencies through development review or through policy work for support in terms of planning for climate change and climate adaptation. That downloading is coming to us, and we'll be I think we're in a position to handle it, but we're still not quite sure what that means. Again, there was great concern expressed about putting land from the Greenbelt back into development, and the province is coming out, proposing to come out to coordinate and some of those policies. So I think we're supportive of strengthening the Greenbelt where possible. Well, I know for sure that's how we are, but still, there's still uncertainty around that. Agriculture, again, they're changes to prime agricultural lands being proposed. While they don't direct Oakville, they don't impact Oakville directly, they do affect the region, they do affect the province. And a concern we have is that if all agricultural land should be treated at the policy level on a balanced basis across the province. In terms of cultural heritage, there's some minor changes and refinements that are proposed, and we don't have concerns with those proposals. And then, interestingly, the whole natural heritage section in the planning statement has not been put forward for review or commentary at this time. We're not sure when. We will review and respond as we have been when that comes forward. And as council knows and as staff is supportive of, natural heritage conservation and protection is very important in Oakville and across the region. It's one of the cornerstones of our urban structure. So next steps in conclusion, thank you for listening. Staff supports the increased flexibility to build more housing. However, there are concerns, again, with these broad sweeping changes and really unintended consequences down the road that I don't think perhaps have been thought through. Bill 97 and the proposed provincial planning statement may have impacts to the town's growth management practices, long-term land use planning, and the ability to deliver required infrastructure. And that's really about unplanned growth where we have a plan, but that plan is being changed beyond our control. Staff continues and will continue to monitor these changes, review the broader implications to identify the town's responsibilities, processes, and procedures which are changing. And then, as always, to provide future reports for council consideration regarding these ongoing changes, to endorse commentary going back to the province on their postings, and again, how we're going to get to the end of our official plan review and achieve consistency and conformity with the new framework. these are the recommendations right out of the report with some highlights. I won't read them. They're there before you in the report, but essentially the bullets are to receive the report, to endorse the comments under bullet 2, to be submitted as part of a package that has already gone in May 6th, and that was really dealing with the changes proposed to the Planning Act. And so those have gone in on time. The third recommendation is again to endorse the comments within the report to be submitted by June 5th of this year. And those are really dealing with the proposed provincial planning statement, the new instrument to replace the growth plan in the PPS. And then the fourth bullet is to endorse the comments in the report to submit to the province prior to May 21st. And those are really dealing with the idea of the reintroduction of the opportunity to use site plan on certain properties with numbers of units. The last one is to, as we have with all of these, is to circulate to our agencies and partners in local municipalities and the various agencies at the province that are proposing this legislation. In this case, it's one ministry, Municipal Affairs and Housing, and then to all our partners as mentioned. Thank you for listening, and thank you for the opportunity to present this information. I'm happy to discuss and take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bigger. Councilor O'Meara, do you want to lead off?
I do, and thank you so much. And I'm very thankful that we got to see this presentation and it just didn't get approved in consent. I think it's important for everybody to see this, and thank you for having one prepared for a consent item, because I know that doesn't always happen. I'm just going to jump right into our staff responses and where I think we need to do a bit better. Page 33, under the planning for people and homes, under the staff response, the very last bulletin, again, doesn't read very well. It's a good community planning in the public interest suggests that the council approved urban structure. And then we talk about the importance of natural heritage, public open space, cultural heritage resources. I don't think good public planning suggests that this, we're not coming across with the vigor and the forcefulness that I think we know what is good public planning. We're not suggesting. There's been generations of it that can tell us that. I also don't see in there, and I think we should be adding, it must be accompanied by provincial infrastructure. We must have schools, we must have hospitals, we must have underpasses on our transit links. These are all vital to providing homes for people and planning that. And I don't see that in our staff response. And I think we're sort of tiptoeing around that a little bit. So, I don't know whether this is all just advice or whether there's a motion to change it, Your Worship. Maybe I can get some guidance after I'm gone through some notes here on what you might like, or whether staff are like, we can add that. I'm not sure. But the other part here is with regards to the climate change and the environment. This council has passed numerous recommendations asking for a green building code, asking for green infrastructure in planning tools and provincial planning. I don't see any of that in the climate change and environment. Again, we're sort of soft pedaling, it's let's have the province have environmental protections, but I mean, we don't really get into what that is. Green landscaping, green architecture, green, we should be advocating for this. If we're going to take on 33,000 more units in 10 years, that's got to be a must. I mean, it's the only way we're going to meet our targets in the climate emergency that we have declared. The last one that I would mention is just with regards to the site plan stuff. Councillor McNeese and I went to a meeting last Wednesday where 50 people were ready to ship us out on a boat because of the flooding in their area, because of the homes being built there, because of water coming in everywhere. And all we could say is we have no control over site plan now. We can't dictate grading on your individual lots. We can't demand swales and stormwater watersheds go in. I mean, that has to be a part of our response to the site plan. And I know we've said, under Bill 23 regime, the town made the comments to the province already, but are we reiterating that in this round of comments? Because we should be. The last I heard, we can use as much paper as we want on our comments to them. So let's reiterate what we've already said again and reinforce that message that it's not good enough just from the shoreline. I can tell you, as one of the wards on the water, I don't get complaints from the people on the lake about, I've got flooding in here. They just go dump it into the lake. I get concerns when our storm sewers are overcharged because of all the development happening, and now we've lost control to manage that. So I would like to see some of those comments in our staff comments as well. I'll leave it at that. And again, Your Worship, I'm at your will on whether you need something from me for that or whether that can just be taken as advice or what you may wish to do.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. I'll give you advice at that time. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Bigger, certainly agree with our professional staff's abilities to work on growth forecasts. Given what we've seen over the past little while, I don't know whether it's realistic for us to be able to maintain those powers. Bill 97, you talked about the employment land revisions. What would that look like in one of our growth areas?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify the question, Councillor, so what does a new definition to employment lands look like?
Currently Midtown's 20,600 minimum,
right.
People and jobs. If they remove or revise the job part of that, what does that look like in Midtown or at the Bronte GO Station or in one of the other growth nodes?
Okay, so just to clarify for the councillor, the changes being proposed are to employment areas.
Right.
And within our growth areas, we don't have employment lands or employment areas. We have to provide for jobs, but it's not land. It's jobs within a mixed use environment. So our growth, those aren't being proposed to change in terms of our ratios for people and jobs.
So we're protected on that.
Those are not being proposed to change. It's outside. So if you look at the town of Oakville, our urban structure, and I do have a slide if you'd like me to bring it up, but it's the blue along the QEW. And then so it's where all the warehousing and where all the offices and where all the take Spears Road, for example, where we have that mix of retail, service, commercial type uses or those sorts of things. The definition to those areas is changing. And so the intent, I believe, for the province is to really focus in on the key industrial, heavy industrial type properties to be protected and to allow more mixing to occur, including residential, in those other areas outside of those critical, heavier industrial areas. So that's where the changes are coming. If just briefly, that would be redrawing our blue to become a bit smaller and coming up with a different designation to accommodate these new frameworks within those areas.
So an industrial area could lose its retail component and become more industrial, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, so there are lots of different ways it could go, but we have an ability to have legal non-conforming uses persist where they exist today. So things aren't going to change overnight, but as change comes along, there'll be perhaps further mixing over here and further concentration over there, for example.
Be careful what we ask for. It may change overnight. I concur with some of Councillor O'Meara's comments, so I'll leave those out. In terms of the overall report, I have difficulty with us endorsing it this evening based on some of the items we've heard. So at the appropriate time, perhaps we could have a chat about that one.
Certainly, Councillor Giddings. Before you relinquish the floor, I took Councillor O'Meara to be suggesting changes he'd like to see in order to be able to endorse it. I haven't heard that kind of offering from you here.
I don't think we'll be able to get those changes completed this evening. I think we could probably receive the report this evening.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor McNeice.
Through your worship, I just have a quick question. So my understanding of the provincial policy statements 2023 later this year, it's a merger of high-level policy statements with a growth plan that traditionally were two separate documents. Your opinion, staff's opinion, are there concerns in merging sort of high-level policy statements with an action-oriented growth plan, or any thoughts on that?
Well, that's what's being proposed, so that's what we're commenting on. And yes, it is a merger of two documents that were separate and evolving on different tracks. I think the intent of the province is to apply the merged policy across the province to provide perhaps some consistency in terms of the planning framework everywhere, and also to simplify and reduce the amount of policy that needs to be considered when planning applications or official plans are being reviewed. So it's a simplifying and it's a generalization approach. And to my comments around climate change, we feel that there were some really strong specific policies previously that we were working towards and we were comfortable with. That's changing. And so those sorts of changes perhaps aren't as supportable or cause greater concern.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through Mayor Burton. Thanks for the presentation also. And just under the growth management and intensification section, the staff comments and response. So right now we have got Midtown, which is the GO train station, at 200 people and jobs per hectare, correct? So now going forward, the province is saying 150? Is that what I'm reading?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, Councillor. The target, the minimum target in a growth area or a major transit station area, because the concept of an urban growth center is being removed from the new proposal. The minimum growth target will be 150 people and jobs per hectare, whereas today's growth plan prescribes 200.
So what I'm reading here is, yeah, it's kind of got the yin and the yang here right now. So they're now and they're going to just encourage, not what you said. What it used to be rather than require. Before it was require, and now they're just encouraging.
That's right. That type of language is finding its way into the document. I would also add, for the councillor's benefit, hopefully, that as mentioned previously, the same minimum forecast will exist until such time that the local municipalities undertake their own. So even though the targets are changing, the minimum amount of growth to be accommodated has not changed. And so that's why we're comfortable with the plan for Midtown and the plan in the urban structure at those levels.
With regard to employment, there is a real problem between certain types of employment and residential. What are they doing about that, solving that problem? So there is a much bigger space, so you don't hear, whether it be the backup beepers or the slamming of docks or whatever. Are they bringing in any legislation at all to prevent that from happening going forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the proposals are I think the high level intent is to open up areas for mixing. So whereas before we had employment areas for employment, and that had a broad list of permitted uses, the proposed changes would narrow the range of permitted uses to more the heavy industrial and permit other types of uses, including residential, to come into those former employment areas. And so your question is about conflict and minimizing impacts. There is language in the proposal to accommodate that. Land use compatibility is still part of the planning process, and so we'll be able to work with that on the way through. There will just be more opportunities for us to have to consider those types of situations as we go forward.
So as we go forward, do we have a chance then of changing what we have, what is there now, that people will not be impacted? If the housing is there and the employment is right now, it's as of right, we can change that employment so that we have more of a buffer for the residential section?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's difficult to comment on that specifically, but I think generally it would be moving in the other direction, Councillor.
Other direction being?
Permitting uses to associate more closely.
Oh boy, that's not what I wanted to hear. No. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I too, Councillor O'Meara made some excellent points, and I appreciate the questions around employment areas and the changes there abutting residential. Everyone knows the agony that the Winston Churchill situation has caused, and it's quite interesting that the province has now acknowledged that large-scale warehousing is industrial in nature. So, but we got a letter from the Joshua Creek Residents Association, and it fairly, calls out the importance of, us having stronger language in how we reply, that these buffers are, and mitigation is just so critical. And after all the work they've done to try and get to hopefully what will be the right level of mitigation. So I thank them for their letter, and I thank my council colleagues for asking about employment, specifically around E1 and E2. If there is currently, will those definitions still exist, for example? Will we have an E1 and E2 once we get through cleaning up all of this?
Through you to the councillor. It's a little bit early to comment on the changes that may occur to our zoning framework on employment areas without having gone through a policy exercise at the official plan level to see what the implications are first there. So we've undertaken an employment commercial review. You were part of prior to being elected to office, councillor. That's how long this has gone on from. So we're going to have to revisit that. And that was some earlier commentary this evening. We will have to go back, and we have done so already in this official plan review to respond to changes. We will be going back to evaluate how our existing policy framework in the official plan measures up to the new changes. And then that'll flow through to zoning ultimately. But it's, and that's where there may be changes to E1, E2, E3, E4. But it's a bit early to comment on what specifically might happen.
So we do have other residential lands, further to Councillor Elger's comments, that abut and have potential large-scale warehousing that could occur. So do they too have to wait for this comprehensive zoning review, which Winston Churchill folks agonized about not being able to get moved along? Am I hearing you correctly that they have to possibly go through this experience, and there's no alternative to try to protect those residential communities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't think that's what we're saying. We have ongoing work to address the questions that this council has brought forward regarding warehousing and its suitability associating with residential uses. So that continues. To what extent it needs to be updated or and when we'll bring that forward, it's still kind of a bit, I think, uncertain. But there is some work underway to address those issues. And then there's that policy reset that we'll be looking at a little bit longer term.
So forgive me, but I'm going to look to the commissioner because I believe we were promised that warehousing information in Q1, and I recognize the world is spinning. I feel for, I not only feel for the folks that have been doing battle on Winston Churchill, but the folks that are about to have to go through something. So how soon would we at least get some clarity around this whole warehousing and what we could possibly do?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we intend to bring forward the work in June. It wasn't scheduled for this month, but forces have overtaken us, and so we've got it on the docket for June. So that'll be a presentation of the consultants' work that we've done, and any recommendations in the short term that we can try to accommodate some of the issues that we're seeing in the warehousing area.
Okay, thank you. All right, a couple other just questions. Can you just comment about how our planning reports to council will change as a result of this bill? Has thought been put to that around how information will be conveyed as a result of any changes in Bill 97?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't So we didn't see anything in the proposed legislation that would affect the way we report to council. So that we would expect that to continue, as is our practice.
Okay, and so there, I believe, somewhere in the document, it talks about how we have to comply with the provincial planning, but if our OP is not up to date, and we may not get our OP up to date in time, then will that be highlighted that while our OP says X, this is what the PPS says, and it therefore takes over?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So planning reports and planning development review needs to always take into consideration the in effect policies. So in some of our reporting, we'll point to, for example, the direction of council and an adoption, but that hasn't yet been approved, for example, by the region. So that's another way we've balanced change and evolution over time. But if there's something in effect, then that applies to the matters being considered, and that will be covered in the staff report. ROP, we can only amend so quickly, and it's not usually quick enough, that's policy. But we do need to, in our development review and our reporting, be current. And so that will continue to be our practice.
Okay, and my last question, I promise, is there's municipal reporting that has to be made to the province that you referenced. When does council get a copy of that report?
Through Mr. Mayor to the councillor. So that's a regulation that was issued under Regulation 73 coming out of was it Bill 23 or Bill 109? Bill 23. And so there's a long list of data requirements that the province is asking for. And I think we're still working out really what the province is asking for in collaboration with some of our departments, but just trying to clarify our understanding of what they're looking for. It's a very, very large ask, and we're not sure they meant it that way. So we're trying to figure that out. When those reports start rolling, then those reports will be made to council, absolutely. It won't be one report. There's reporting periods that are monthly, there's reporting periods that are annually. It's the province monitoring what we're doing in terms of providing housing supply, and it touches everything. So there'll be lots of reporting to council on that. Hopefully not in dribs and drabs, but on a regular, comprehensive way.
So would those reports then regularly allow us to have a tally of we've built X amount, we have X amount in the pipeline against the target? That is information that we would then be getting regularly.
Oh, certainly that would be.
Okay. Thank you very much for your patience with my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett-Thiel. Councillor Nanda?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to be too repetitive. The councillors did ask many of the questions I was thinking of, but in terms of the warehouse and abutting residencies, we do have a lot of concerns as well about this. Has there been any previous reports in regards to what impacts there have been with having abutting residences with warehouses? I know in our area it's newer, but I know in other areas this has been done before. Because one of my biggest concerns is how they want to focus on heavy industry and large scale. And now they want to use other employment land to make residencies. And that could be a huge issue if there's not enough space between the two lands. So is there anything to show us, or that we would be able to show the province as well, that it could have negative impacts on areas and on residents?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll look to my colleagues here. We don't have, I believe, any town-initiated work that would address directly impacts that you're referring to. We have a series of employment and commercial reviews over time that have helped us to develop our official plan policies and the land use designations that set out where those uses can develop. The changing nature of warehousing or other industries has raised new concerns or brought forward other concerns. So we're continuing to look at those. And as our commissioner indicated a moment ago, we have a report coming forward in June that deals with some of those matters. But I think the larger issues around what we've been discussing this evening under Bill 97 will be the subject of future review and input as well from council and the community.
So that's something we could expect in the future then, or something we could ask if need be?
So we do have a comprehensive report coming forward on the issue in June. And if there are gaps, council can certainly direct further work, but it will identify anything that we can do in the short term, as well as provide guidance for our official plan review in terms of how it directs the whole-scale changes needed in the zoning to accomplish it. But are there tactics that we can do in the short term that would help some of the issues that we're seeing?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shi, were you still wanting to ask questions?
I think Director already answered the question. There will be more details on June.
Thank you very much. Well then, Council, I'm going to put the question to the Planning Commissioner and Director. How would you recommend, how would you like to deal with the 3 points that Councillor O'Meara raised about the nature of the language at page 33, the word suggests instead of something stronger, and his additional suggestion that we should use the opportunity to renew our call for a green building code and green architecture and so on, the list he had, which I'm sure you jotted down. And his further comment on site plan control. There were some assumptions there in what he said about we can't require grading and we can't require swales, and if that's true, it's new to me. So perhaps you might want to offer some explanation around that third point, but to the councillors, more pointed comments about slight changes to the wording of the submission. Myself, I have trouble imagining that. I imagine you might be perfectly willing to change suggest to a stronger verb, but it's over to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just discuss what might be the best way of doing this. If council has some additions to the resolution, we'd be more than happy to include that as part of the submission to the province. If there is a desire to have something for council to look at first, we can work on that during the duration of this meeting to give something back to council perhaps after a break later on this evening, if that would help council.
Okay, so just to check and make sure I understand correctly, I take you to be suggesting that during the meeting, staff will draft an additional recommendation that would say, in addition, council has the following, or words to the effect of, council has these additional comments for your consideration. So, Councilor O'Meara, how does that strike you?
Well, Your Worship, I fully trust that staff heard the comments that I made and that you reiterated. I am happy if they go and add those and massage those into the document that's already here and send it. Unless council really wants to see something, I think they've got the gist. I'm okay if they go away with that direction tonight with this. I don't need to re-see anything towards the end of the meeting. But that, just for me personally, as the one who brought it up, I'm okay with staff going away with what we mentioned and wordsmithing it that way.
Oh, thank you for that, Mr. Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will take that as a direction. We will include that in the memo that we submit to the province.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the offer, and I agree with Councillor O'Meara. I still have difficulties with endorsing, based on all the comments and the material that was presented. I still have difficulty with us endorsing this report.
Thank you, Councillor. Endorsement has been moved by Councillor Knoll, and you're perfectly free to vote against it to express your disagreement with it. I asked you earlier if you had a specific change that would make you happier, and you didn't, but you're always free to just vote against it.
I appreciate the offer. In terms of changing the report, I don't think that is going to occur. And I just have, I think everyone around this table would have concern with endorsing, given what we've heard and what we've been experiencing over the past several months.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Elgar.
Through you, Mayor Burton, to staff, regarding endorsing this, what we are endorsing is staff's comments. It's not the bill itself, we're endorsing staff's comments.
Councillor, yes.
Yes.
Staff are giving the province feedback on their changes.
You see, I think there may be some confusion. If you read this, I can see that it could be read that we're endorsing one in Bill 97, the other one is Places to Grow. But I think as I dig through it, I'm thinking it's endorsing the staff recommendations.
Yes, Councillor, that's exactly right. There's no thought here that council or staff are members of the legislature. The legislature has spoken. Those are the bills. We're offering, if you will, criticism and requests for changes.
Maybe there's a bit of clarity required.
The way it's written, it's clear that said Schedules 2, 4, 6 of Bill 97 be endorsed, that the Place to Grow and provincial policy statement to form a new provincial planning policy instrument be endorsed. The City of Toronto Act be endorsed. I just have difficulties endorsing carte blanche.
That's not what it is.
That's the way it's written.
Well, instead of reading only a piece of it, could I read the whole thing, one of the blocks? Let's take number 3. The comments within this report related to the, quote, review of proposed policies adapted from a Place to Grow and provincial policy statement to form a new provincial planning policy instrument, unquote, be endorsed. The comments, not the province's act. In number 4 and number 5, and for that matter in number 2, it's the same. The subject of the sentence is the comments to be endorsed. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Elgar, for your assistance on that. Councillor Longo?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was thinking to potentially put that the comments within this report be endorsed related to, like, just put it up front to make it cleaner as a thought.
So there's no misinterpretation.
Right. So you're endorsing the comments, the staff comments. You're not endorsing anything related to the bills per se.
All right. Yes. Council, I recommend that we say that council endorses the comments within this report. Yes. At every block. Are we all happy with that? No? Councillor Hazlet-Deal, what would make you happy?
Frame it as the staff comments. And then it's very clear. It's the staff's comments in regards to, and then it would be clear, and I think it might get.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a lovely idea.
Kumbaya.
So are we all clear on that? May I put the vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Now, well, it didn't take as long as the other item, so that is progress. All right, now, you have very good reports before you for the confidential consent items with clear recommendations here. And so I would ask, is there a mover for the confidential consent items? Councillor Giddings, thank you. Any objection by anyone to the to the confidential consent items? I declare, there is no opposition. I declare them carried and adopted as in the agenda. Thank you. Now we come to our discussion item, and that is the recommendation report for the town-initiated official plan amendment and official plan amendment zoning bylaw amendment for Support House at 130 Cornwall Road. We have a presentation. We have a registered delegation being a representative of the group, and that delegation is available if there are questions, otherwise not. And we will poll the audience for any delegations. And I invite your attention to Brandon Hassan, who has prepared a presentation to help the public understand this matter, because it's a public hearing.
Great, thank you, Mayor Burton, members of council, and members of the public tuning into tonight's meeting. This presentation is in relation to item 7.1 on tonight's agenda. This town-initiated official plan amendment application, concurrently with the applicant-initiated official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications, relates to the proposed development of the lands municipally known as 130 Cornwall Road, owned by Support House, for a 5-story, 37-unit affordable housing apartment building. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide the staff analysis of the applications and provide recommendations to council in order for a decision to be made. As seen on the location map, the subject lands are located on the south side of Cornwall Road between Old Mill Road and Trafalgar Road. For those that are not familiar with the property, this is an air photo map of the property showing the Via Rail and GO Station lands to the north and 16 Mile Creek to the south. As seen in the proposed site plan, it depicts the apartment building in orange with the parking located on the east side and Cornwall Road to the north. These are the conceptual elevation drawings of the north being the front and south being the rear facades. These are the conceptual elevation drawings of the east being the right and the west being the left facades. And these are the 3D conceptual renderings of the north, east, and west elevations. The subject land is currently designated as parks and open space as seen in the livable Oakville plan map. However, the purpose of the town-initiated official plan amendment application is to correct this mapping error and designate the property as high-density residential. Schedule A to official plan amendment number 55 is shown on the screen, which, as mentioned previously, would correct the land use designation from parks and open space to high-density residential. Schedule A to official plan amendment number 56 is shown on the screen, which is the basis for the applicant-initiated official plan amendment to permit a maximum of 355 units per site hectare based on the proposed 37 units and small size of the property after the road widening is conveyed to the town. In regards to the zoning bylaw 2014-014, the property is currently zoned residential high special provision 198. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment application would rezone the property to residential high special provision 422 with a holding provision 53 in order for conditions to be fulfilled related to requirements of the Halton region for servicing and site contamination. As far as public consultation, a virtual public information meeting was held on February 16th, 2022 to present the subject applications. The Ward 3 councilors, staff, and 50 members of the public attended the virtual meeting. Staff have identified similar items and have reviewed them as part of the matters to be addressed contained within the staff report as part of the application's analysis. And further to the matters of interest, one of the items that was brought up at the statutory public meeting was potential impacts on the abutting town walkway to the south and Old Mill Parkette to the west. As seen on the screen, it depicts shadowing for 3 time intervals during April and June 21. The shadows cast after 12 p.m. onto the adjacent site to the northeast do not impact the existing retirement community building nor its amenity spaces, only the surface parking area behind it. And these are 2 separate dates, being September 21st and December 21st, as seen on the screen with the same 3 time intervals. The Old Mill Parkette to the southwest does not receive any shadows from the new development. the existing public sidewalk on Cornwall Road and the existing path along 16 Mile Creek both receive more than 5 hours of continuous sunlight per day and are more shaded from the existing tree cover than from the new development. Further to the previous slides illustrating shadows as a result of the proposed development, the submitted canopy cover plan illustrates the town's required 20% canopy cover target will be met and exceeded with approximately 46.6%. Most importantly, the trees located along the rear property line abutting the public walkway will be retained. Further to the matters of interest I've just reviewed, the staff report details the matters to be addressed, which staff have completed a review and analysis for, as shown with check marks on the screen. And in conclusion, staff put forth the following recommendations as shown for council's consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Are there members of the audience with information for council on this file? Madam Clerk, I see none. Council, do you have questions that would call upon the representative of the applicant? Councilor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if I could just get, I've looked at Support House and I see the various funding components or funders of the service. My question would be, how is it going to be administered in terms of placement for the housing? Is it through the regional housing services, or is it its own entity that they do the placement?
Mr. Hassan.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I would look to Nancy Friday of GSP Group if she has a more detailed response than I'd be able to provide.
Welcome, Ms. Friday.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This is probably a better question for Support House. They were going to attend tonight, but we thought that maybe it was, since there was a lot of support for this proposal, I would just attend and take any questions. But I believe, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I believe it is administered by Support House, that they take the applications themselves and they review them and decide on the tenants themselves.
Okay, that's helpful. And would you happen to know as well, we bandy about the word affordable housing. Is there a clear definition, and is there, say, a range for placement by, geared to income, things of that nature, similar to what we have with Hatch?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, every individual, I believe, is different. They may have some income, they may not have income, but gathered income from subsidies or grants or other types of support. And so I think that maybe, and I don't know for sure, and I apologize for not having the answer, but that would be a range and a scale depending on the amount of money that each individual has coming in.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I'd be pleased to move the report, and I did want to compliment the report that we received, and particularly the shadow studies. It's probably the clearest pictures we've gotten, and the time variations, et cetera. I appreciated it was an important concern about the parquet and about the ability to continue to enjoy. So I thank you for that detail, and I'm pleased to move it.
Councillor, thank you very much for the motion. Thank you, Ms. Friday, for your assistance. Council, may I put the vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Madam Clerk, that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Our next recommendation report, 7.2, is the draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment, Mattamy Joshua Creek Limited, Phase 3, part of lots 8 and 9. And we have a presentation from Mr. Hassan. We have a registered delegation to represent the applicant if we have questions, and I will poll the audience for any further delegations. Mr. Hassan, we are all ears.
Great, thank you again, Mayor Burton, members of council and members of the public turning into tonight's meeting. This presentation is in relation to item 7.2 on tonight's agenda. These zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision applications relate to the proposed development of the Mattamy Joshua Creek Phase 3 lands. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide the staff analysis of the applications and provide recommendations to council in order for decisions to be made. As seen on the location and air photo maps, the subject lands are located on the north side of Dundas Street East, south of Burnham Thorpe Road, east of Trafalgar Road, and west of 9th Line. For those that are not familiar with the property, the composite plan on the left side of the screen depicts the surrounding subdivisions, being Great Gulf and Mattamy to the south, Argo to the east, and Rampton to the west. On the right side of the screen is the proposed draft plan of subdivision, which contains 702 detached dwellings, 314 townhouse units, parks, a school, and natural heritage system. As seen on the screen, the subject lands are outlined in red on the North Oakville master plan map. The subject lands are designated neighborhood area and natural heritage system in the North Oakville East Secondary Plan and are classified in more detail within the master plan as natural heritage system, neighborhood park, village square, elementary school site, neighborhood center, general urban and suburban area. In regards to the zoning bylaw 2009-189, the subject lands are currently zoned future development, FD. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment application would rezone the property to various residential zones, natural heritage, park, and institutional. Further to the previous slide, which depicted the proposed zoning, the same Schedule A to bylaw 2023-036 is shown on the left, and the related draft plan of subdivision is shown on the right, noting that the Phase 3B lands are subject to a holding provision for future allocation to be determined by Halton Region. One of the items that was brought up at the statutory public meeting in 2020 was protecting for and maintaining the north-south road connection between Dundas and Burnham Thorpe, being Street B on the draft plan. As seen on the screen, I've illustrated the subject lands outlined in red on the master plan and the north-south road with an aqua color dotted line, and similarly with a red dotted line through the draft plan of subdivision. Furthermore, protecting for and maintaining the primary east-west road connection being Street D on the draft plan. As seen on the screen, I've illustrated the subject lands outlined in red on the master plan and the east-west road with an aqua color dotted line, and similarly with a red dotted line through the draft plan of subdivision. Together, both road connections have been protected and secured for coordination with the surrounding subdivisions as part of the master plan. Another matter of interest was parking, specifically on-street within the proposed draft plan of subdivision. On the left side of the screen is the draft plan with conceptual on-street parking depicted with orange blocks. And on the right side of the screen is a zoomed-in section of the plan of particular interest, being near the school site and the live-work units along Street B of the activity node. Further to the matters of interest I've just reviewed, the staff report details the matters to be addressed, which staff have completed a review and analysis for, as shown with the check marks on the screen. And these items round out the list of the matters to be addressed. In conclusion, staff put forth the following recommendations as shown for council's consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Are there any members of the public with information for council on this file? Madam Clerk, I see none. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Through Mayor Burton to staff. Question regarding elementary school. Is there any clause in there that would allow that school to have houses built on it, similar to what we have right now in a subdivision in Ward 4, where they have an as-of right to build so many houses if the school property is not purchased by a certain date?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Burton, if we can pull up the presentation again and go to the zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
I can illustrate it a little bit better. So I don't know if I can control the mouse, but it is a little bit tough to see where the left side of the screen shows the draft zoning bylaw, and you can see there's a rectangular block with a P, and then right under it is the I. That would be the school site. So there's been no holding provisions with any sort of timeframes that would require that change to occur, and there's been no, I guess, conditions of approval contained in the draft plan conditions for that time frame to elapse before that can be turned into residential. So as it stands today, if this bylaw were to be approved, the site would be zoned institutional and a zone change would be required to change it to residential in the future.
I thank you very much for that. That's important, and I hope I never see it again, and as long as I'm on council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Are there any other questions for anyone? I wonder if, this is Ward 6. What's Ward 6? All right, it's moved by Councillor Adams. May I put the vote? All those in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Madam Clerk, carried unanimously. 7.3 is the recommendation report, draft plan of subdivision and condominium for 239 to 249 Rebecca Street. And we now have a presentation from Paul Barrett, our acting manager, and we have a registered delegation on behalf of the applicant if questions arise, and I will poll the audience for any delegations. Mr. Barrett, you have our undivided attention.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. This presentation will provide a summary of the staff recommendation report regarding this plan of subdivision and plan of condominium application for 6 townhouse units, which is item 7.3 on tonight's agenda. The subject property is located at the northeast corner of Dorval Drive and Margaret Drive and Rebecca Street and is 0.12 hectares in size. The purpose of the draft plan of subdivision application is to permit future land division through part lot control exemption, which would create individual parcels of tied land for each of the 6 townhouse units. The parcels of tied land would be tied to the proposed draft plan of common element condominium comprised of a private laneway and landscaping. The subject property is designated medium density residential by Livable Oakville and zoned RM1 Special Provision 377. Through the review and approval of the site plan application, the development has been subject to detailed technical analysis. Specifically, the following matters listed on this slide were addressed through previous planning processes. The draft plan of subdivision and draft plan of condominium implement the previously approved site plan approval. Both will facilitate transfer of the townhouse units to the beneficial purchasers, and the plan of condominium will provide for shared vehicular access to each of the units and establish long-term maintenance obligations. As noted in the staff report, staff have completed a detailed technical review and are recommending approval subject to the conditions in Appendix A and B. The staff report specifically explains how the condominium declaration will provide for long-term maintenance of several components of the site plan, such as privacy fencing, which helps mitigate headlight impacts, maintenance of the existing and expanded cedar hedge, and other landscaping within the common element condominium. In terms of public consultation, consultation occurred through previous planning applications. A public information meeting was held for the subject applications on September 13th of last year, and it was attended by 7 residents. No public comments have been received as part of the subject applications. In conclusion, staff is satisfied that the applications are consistent with the provincial policy statement, conform or do not conflict with all applicable provincial plans, conform to the Halton Region Official Plan and Livable Oakville Plan, and have regards for matter of provincial interest. Staff recommend approval of the draft plan of subdivision and condominium as the requirements listed on this slide have been satisfied. In conclusion, Your Worship, staff put forth the following recommendation as stated for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Councillor Chisholm may have a question for you.
Not a question. I move the report, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. Before I put that to a vote, let me just poll the audience in case there are any further comments from any member of the public with information. And I see none, Madam Clerk, and I declare that Councillor Chisholm's motion is in order. May I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously, Madam Clerk. Now, Council, we have a heritage designation project plan before you. We have no registered delegations. I actually don't see any members of the public in the chamber to poll, but Kirk Bigger, who's our Manager of Policy Planning and Heritage, is available for questions on this. Councillor Duddick.
I don't have any questions. I'd be pleased to move it. And I also wanted to commend staff for being so proactive in terms of hiring the additional staff to facilitate this being moved forward in a timely manner. Well done.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duddick. Is there any objection to Councillor Duddick's motion? Madam Clerk, there being none, I declare the motion carried unanimously. Council, the next item before us is the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee minutes to be received. Councillor Giddings, thank you. Any objection? There being none, that is carried. If a member would move rise and report to council, Councillor McNeice, thank you. Any objection to Councillor McNeice's motion? There being none, that's carried. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 4.1 and 4.2, confidential consent items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3, and discussion items 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4, and advisory committee minutes 9.1 as noted by the clerk. Now, I have a mover and seconder for the report. Councillor Lischina and Councillor Grant, thank you. Any objection? There being none, the motion is adopted. The report is adopted. Council, does anyone have any emergency, congratulatory, or condolence information to share? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I would like to thank one of our own and congratulate Councillor Lischina on her appointment as chairwoman to the Ukrainian Credit Union. From what I understand, the very first woman to lead the organization, and she does us all a great credit in Oakville here, representing not just your diaspora, but also all the residents of Oakville. So congratulations, Councillor Lischina, on that. It's a real achievement.
Councillor Shi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Nanda and I just invited all the council members and staff to join tomorrow's night celebration night for Asian Heritage Month. So we guarantee you will enjoy. And there's 12 wonderful traditional dance and the music represent the diverse Asian culture. So I know there is a CEO award event at 5 to 7. So the performance starts at 7:20. So you have time to catch up. Thank you.
So be there or be square. Thank you, Councillor Shi. At this time, it would be in order for a mover and seconder for consideration reading of the bylaws. Councillor Longo and Councillor Elger, thank you. And is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the bylaws are carried, read, and adopted. That ends our work. I want to thank everybody for their outstanding contributions to our deliberations tonight. It's been terrific working with you, and that's the end of the meeting.